Hey y'all, follow me here as we show and give you a quick rundown on how the latest piece was made as far as power carving. This piece was modeled after the Samoan Nifo Oti, or the traditional war club, and over time that war club has evolved into an implement used in Samoan fire knife dancing. The wood that I used for this project was Purple Heart, which is an exotic hardwood. I took that wood and cut it to size on the sliding miter saw, drew out my template or the shape of it, and then screwed it to this piece of scrap wood. I screwed it to the scrap wood instead of using clamps because sometimes those clamps get in the way of the sled portion of the jigsaw, and it just helps me out a whole lot. A lot of the times when I'm doing these pieces, I'm kind of just flying by the seat of my pants and experimenting with the different woodworking tools and different techniques. So if something looks a little off, it probably is, but I'm just seeing what else works. There's other variations of this particular piece that I've made, and I chose specifically not to show those in their entirety in this video because they're going to be mailed out pretty soon as a surprise for a couple of folks. Those pieces were a lot more intricate, had some other features to them than what I'm showing here, and a lot of thought went into why I chose to design them that way for those people. After cutting out the rough shape of this, I took the high-speed cutting attachment on the Dremel and cut out some notches in the hook portion of the blade that'll be cut out later on. And then I grabbed the barrel sanding attachment for the Dremel so I can get inside that portion of the hook and other small areas where the palm sander might not be able to get. I then took the palm sander with 60 or 80 grit sandpaper, forget which one it was, and did a quick sand on it so that later on when I start to draw and carve into it, it's not so bad, it's a lot smoother. I'm also wearing some breathing protection on this. Anytime you're sanding or carving wood, especially with exotic woods, you want to be wearing that type of protection. The exotic woods have a bad habit of giving off some toxic fumes and dust particles when you're cutting away into them. So there I've got the cutting wheel cutting those notches into the blade. That particular style that was inspired by custom Maui hooks. So Chato, if you're watching this, man, thank you for the inspiration. His design on these Samoan fire knives, it adds a whole lot of style and flair to the knife itself. I then take the barrel sander back to it to round out some of those edges and give it more of a finished and refined look. What I'm doing here is drawing and using the wheel attachment to cut out the notches or the teeth of the blade. The more ancient and the first variations of the Nifo Oti were carved in this same manner, with the blade being that style. But if you ever get a chance to look it up, it's spelled Nifo space Oti. Look up those different versions of the Nifo Oti as it evolved over time, and you'll see how it was such a devastating and ferocious war club. I mean, you imagine the weight of this thing being swung at a person. Not only the weight of the club itself, but also with those sharp edges, and some of the variations even had shark teeth. Now, once the blade portion was cut out, I did the rough sketch of how I want my design to look as I carve into it. And you can also see right there beside my hand is a portion of one of the other custom pieces I'm making. When designing the carving here, I chose to use symbols also familiar with the traditional tatau. Those symbols that I chose for this piece really told the story of the knife. Because it was the war club, I wanted this thing to tell the story of asking for the strength of the warrior, the guidance, the balance, and safe travels, safe journeys. Sometimes when I'm doing the power carving, I'll use the actual engraving attachment for the Dremel. But for this piece, when I was looking at it and I was looking how I designed it, there was a lot of straight lines and a lot of long lines. So I figured that using a cutting wheel or a sanding wheel was going to be a lot more effective and efficient for maintaining those lines. Not only did it help me keep the lines straight and consistent, but that wheel also allowed me to cut deeper into the wood so that later on when I fill them in, it just looks a whole lot better. And you could see how the lines contrast from the grain of the wood. It's a lot darker. And that's just simply from the friction of the blade going through there, almost like a burning effect. For some of the portions later on, I even go back and paint it in. This was Kailani reminding me that I promised her we'd go out to dinner. And so, yeah, paused the video, took my baby on a dinner date, and came back and finished this thing off. Right here on these spearheads, you can really see how it helped to use the wheel for cutting those straight lines in versus the engraving tool. That engraving tool is, the end of it is about the same as a pen or a pencil tip. So sometimes you stray away from the lines when you're using something that fine. And, you know, woodwork is not like drawing on paper. Once you've cut it in there, there's no erasing. So you either end up scrapping the whole piece and starting over, or you get real creative on covering up your mistakes. But I do end up eventually going to that engraving attachment. That thing is awesome when you need to get into some small spaces or you have a lot more intricate designs. If you like this and you want to check out some of the other pieces, you can check out, I have some stuff on my Instagram, which is right here. Or just stay on this YouTube channel. We have a playlist specifically designed or dedicated to our other woodworks. Not only the jewelry or the other cultural pieces, but we've also made some variations of Tahitian drums out of wood and then some out of PVC pipe. And if you're into fishing, I got a couple of videos on there too, more to come on that. Still getting used to this whole YouTube thing. Once all this carving is done, I sand it one more time before filling in the ends. When I want my other lines to blend with that burned effect, there's different ways you can do it. On this particular one, I used a permanent marker because it was just such a small area. But you can also use black acrylic paint. I've even seen spray paint. Just whatever you want to fill those lines in with. And then you go back and you hit the top surface with sandpaper to get it off of there and then back to its original color, while that paint or that color still maintains inside the lines. Then I cover an area with painter's tape and drill the hole where the string will go if this piece is to be worn as a necklace or an ornament of any sort. That tape prevents any blowouts or ripouts and creates less of a mess. Then we hang it on my little contraption here to apply the clear coat. That is the most bootleg piece of equipment I've ever built. The Dremel needs to be sitting upright so that I can use that flexible attachment. So that's the stand I made, and then with a clamp and a straight pick I can hang this piece up to apply the clear coat. And here's the finished product, y'all. I appreciate you taking a look.